dropped it in a bucket, touchdown!
Uecker transition three, bang!
He's bends it like Beckham. Are you kidding?
Howdy gamers, welcome back for episode 44 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week was a round robin on anything and everything. MLB free agents, the end of fantasy football season, of course the LA wildfires and how that's affecting the sportsverse, even the college football playoff. Today, I'm thinking NFL honors predictions, just so I can remind everybody that the voting for these has already closed and nothing from the playoffs counts towards them. Then some other stuff. We'll just go grab baggy again, and off we go. So here's something you've probably never considered. There's a different name for the major awards in pretty much every league. The NFL has NFL honors, of course. The MLB has postseason awards, which is kind of a funny name, right? Because they aren't given for achievements from the postseason, but they are giving out during the postseason, sort of like normal. The NBA and the NHL, they wait until after their respective finals are over to award anything, and then they just call theirs the insert league name here awards. Why all the four major American sports choose to do things at least somewhat differently for their awards, I honestly have no idea. But we accept it like the mindless consumer bots that we are. Okay, what I actually wanted to get into with this segment, let's predict with 100% accuracy every NFL honors winner. These are given out the Thursday before the Super Bowl, which is going to be February 6th this year. I think I like this format the best, that is, knowing the award winners before your championship's decided, because it just gives you something to watch and to talk about those last few days before that blessed event. It's easy to be too stressed if your team is in the championship, or too bored if they aren't, you know? Anyway, the big one is most valuable player. It's the thing that can define a whole career. Make or break a Hall of Fame case, inflate your contract value for the rest of your career. It's also the award for the best quarterback for the most part. And in almost every case as well, the quarterback that wins the first team All-Pro nod also wins MVP. That's why I think it's going to be Lamar Jackson of the Ravens. Much of the year I thought it would be Josh Allen. And lots of people are still back and forth on them, right? Especially when Josh started piling up the rushing numbers later in the year. From week 10 to 14, this is absolutely absurd. He had one of the best quarterback rushing stretches that I'm aware of. He had 273 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns in 5 weeks. That was great. The fact that he only took 14 sacks the entire year was mind-boggling. And obviously he can take over and single-handedly win football games, and that adds to his case, right? Josh did exactly that to beat the Chiefs in Week 11. He had this huge scramble touchdown late when they were only up by 2 on a 4th down run. And yet, having a good team all around him might possibly prevent him from winning. Lamar's counting stats are better in every way. I'll just get to that right now. That's the elephant in the room. Lamar had more passing yardage, more passing touchdowns, 2 fewer interceptions, although neither of them really had turnover issues. How about a better completion percentage, more rushing yards, more yards per rush and per pass attempt? How about creating his own club, throwing for 4,000 yards, rushing for 900? Nobody had ever done that before. The team record was different by 1 game. The Ravens went 12-5, and the Bills went 13-4 to get the 2 seed, which I think matters, but very slightly. If there were a bigger gap between the 2 team records, then it would matter a whole lot more. See, for example, Joe Burrow versus Josh Allen, right, with the Bengals not making the playoffs. There were plenty of fourth quarters where Josh only played a drive or 2, or sometimes not at all, because the Bills were just throttling people. Josh Allen also led the 2 most impressive wins any team pulled off this whole year. I don't think a single other quarterback beat or could have beaten this year's Lions on the road no less, and the Chiefs, both of whom went 15-2. Lamar was more steady, Josh was more up and down, but my 2024 MVP pick, Lamar Jackson. Like I typically do when I'm picking these are the player I think is going to win, not necessarily who I want to see. It would be Lamar's third, and that obviously will put him in that inner circle Hall of Famer, if he retired right now kind of conversation, and I think it's likely. Offensive Player of the Year is an easier one. It's Saquon Barkley of the Eagles. 2,000 rushing yards, and would have had a great chance to break the all-time single-season rushing record if he had played Week 18. The Bengals' Jamar Chase is probably going to have to come in second place, even though he won the receiving triple crown. I'm guessing he'll be second anyway, and Derrick Henry, the second best amazing running back that joined a new team this year, probably going to be third. Henry only had 18 total touchdowns and 1,921 rushing yards, the most ever for a running back over the age of 30. Oh, and only averaged 5.9 yards a carry. I feel worse for Derrick Henry when I say it out loud because he had a better year than almost all of the actual Offensive Player of the Year winners throughout history, ever. That's just how insane those three guys were. Defensive Player of the Year might be the closest race out of all the honors here. I would personally cast my vote for the Eagles linebacker Zach Bond, but I'm not convinced that it's going to be him. In fact, I think that's really unlikely. My pitch for Bond is about total impact because his stat sheet is bonkers. He's an off-ball linebacker. He had 3.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, an interception, 151 tackles, 4 PBUs. For a guy that had never even been a full-time starter, this is one of the greatest linebacker seasons ever. But most sportsbooks aren't even offering odds on him right now because we don't value off-ball linebacker play, pretty much at all. Patrick Surtain II, the Broncos corner, was one vote off of a unanimous first-team All-Pro selection. I still can't really imagine who didn't vote for him because I think he is worlds beyond any other corner. He wasn't charged with a single missed tackle for the year, which is otherworldly. We don't expect corners to tackle anymore, and so many of them just kind of get in the way. They set screens, and they're never trying to thump people. Surtain is so different in that aspect, a dominant run defender out there on the edge. He was targeted less than 4 times a game, and he still pulled down 4 interceptions. He was the second best corner rated by Pro Football Focus, and they graded 223 corners this year. Surtain was also third in coverage grade, only gave up 2 touchdowns on the year, and shut down every single number 1 wide receiver he had to cover. That all adds up to him having incredibly good odds at minus 550, so in all likelihood, this is a formality, and Pat Surtain II is my prediction. Other good candidates, TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, are always going to be some of the best edge rushers in the league, but the Bengals' Trey Hendrickson, he really should be a new addition to this kind of club. He led the league with 17 sacks this year, and people forget, he also had 17 sacks last year. I tried to find data on this for the most sacks in 2 consecutive years ever. I couldn't quite figure it out, but that's got to be close to a record. Absurd. The Lions' Kirby Joseph was the top-rated safety by PFF, and he had the best coverage grade among safeties, plus led the league with 9 interceptions. Still, though, he was not the first-team All-Pro selection, but he's not as much of a household name yet. I think he'll get there, but I don't see anybody wrestling this away from Surtain. Offensive Rookie of the Year is the most decided race of all, if you want to talk about the sports books and the odds they're offering. I called this, too, right at draft time. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman at LSU, and now he arguably looks better in the NFL. He broke the rookie quarterback rushing record, made the playoffs, won 12 games without a particularly great team around him, led an 8-win improvement, and the numbers, too, obviously. 31 total touchdowns to 9 interceptions, 4 game-winning drives with 4 fourth-quarter comebacks just in the regular season. This award isn't usually guaranteed to go to a quarterback. In fact, quarterbacks have only won 11 times out of the 57 years it's been given out so far. 35 are actually running backs and 11 receivers. Unfortunately, no tight ends yet, but man, again, if I could launch my vote, I would give it to Brock Bowers, the Raiders tight end who just completely reset the record book for rookie tight ends. Yeah, they don't ask me, and I don't have a vote. No one else led any 8-win improvements for their teams, though. No one else changed an entire franchise's outlook more. Jaden Daniels could be the first rookie to ever start in a Super Bowl, assuming he gets through an unbelievably difficult NFC slate, which is by no means guaranteed, but man, he is so special, and Jaden Daniels will be the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Defensive Rookie of the Year should be a landslide too. Keyword is should, so I don't want to waste my breath on it too much. The Rams' edge rusher, Jared Verse, is going to win this. He was 4th in the league in total pressures with 77. That's the most ever recorded by a rookie since those have been tracked, which granted hasn't been so long. It's been in the next-gen stats era. 2nd in the league, though, in quarterback hurries among all positions, among all defensive players, with 52. Yes, he only came up with 6 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. That's not eye-popping, but the other numbers just prove he was one of the most unblockable rookies ever. His odds are minus 4,000, which is to say that nobody else has a chance. But I would say maybe the other two that could get a few votes for, 2nd and 3rd place are both Eagles corners, Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. They really held their own in the run and the pass game, and that Eagles defense, they ended up leading the league by a ton in the fewest points and yards allowed. That's great, but Jared Verse had this wrapped up by maybe middle of November. He will be the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Comeback Player of the Year is one of those awards that everybody struggles with the criteria for, and I do too. It should, I guess, be reserved for people coming back from an injury or suspension or time out of the league, but the funniest candidate is just one that came back from being a backup quarterback and being not very good at football. Sam Darnold had the 2nd best odds by most sportsbooks a lot of the year to win this, and Joe Burrow is actually the favorite right now after he tore a wrist tendon in Week 11 last year. And look, Joe Burrow played great before that, is amazing all the time when healthy, so I just don't see this as that much of a story. If Joe Burrow plays multiple healthy seasons in a row, he's going to, start building a Hall of Fame case already, and at some point he will almost certainly, I think, win an MVP. His talent is not the issue at all. With Sam Darnold, people kind of didn't know that he was so talented. I guarantee you nobody expected him, after never having played more than 13 games in a year and only starting once last year with San Fran, to have the definition of a career year. Darnold had 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns this year. I'm going to pick him because I think it's just the far more compelling story. Like I say, unfortunately, Joe Burrow is the favorite here and has been injured quite often. That's the only reason why we even consider him. But Darnold might have been the best quarterback surprise this year, and his comeback is for, his whole career. He really resurrected it. Finally, my Coach of the Year pick is Motor City Dan Campbell. He's actually the biggest underdog by the books of anybody that I'm picking. I never thought I would say that, but it's interesting. Andy Reid is always in the conversation because the Chiefs always get the number 1 seed, right? Blah. Kevin O'Connell is the favorite by most sports books, but I really think they're overselling him and the Vikings' whole season. It's easy to say that because they just got knocked out of the playoffs, right? Again, all of this voting has ended. It's right after Week 18 of the regular season ends, I believe, and before the wild card games that the voting ends. O'Connell's got some implied probabilities as good as about 88% or so to win, and I still struggle to say that the voters are going to be nearly that convinced, considering Dan Campbell and Andy Reid both won 15 games, and they both improved by at least 3 wins from last year when they already had sky-high expectations and were really good last year. The Chiefs obviously winning the Super Bowl and the Lions losing in the NFC Championship. O'Connell is smart and one of the most relatable guys in the league, right? Being only 39, being a former backup quarterback. He's not much older than his oldest couple of players, but I think other coaches could have led Minnesota to thrive. That's where you really see the difference with Dan Campbell and Andy Reid. Not a single other coach could manage games the way that they do. They would do less with more on those teams. You know what I mean? The one chance Dan Campbell has is that the Lions completely thrashed the Vikings in Week 18 to take that number 1 seed. Andy Reid has essentially 0 shot at this, which is a shame, but that's just the expectation that the Chiefs have set. He's looking to three-peat in the Super Bowl, right? I think people have figured it out with him. So fingers crossed on all of this, but I do think that it's going to be the Vikings' Kevin O'Connell for Coach of the Year. So what else is going on? So much. It's kind of overwhelming. This will be one of the longer rapid fires I've done because there is just too much to do everything justice. The Rams are expected, as of Thursday, to get back to practicing in LA at their home facility. The Lakers and Clippers were able to start their home slate back up. In fact, they're playing each other this Sunday night. That's got to mean some progress, at least, in fighting the wildfires in California, and I've heard that the winds dying down a little bit has helped that. I'm sure the NBA is going to have some makeup dates for both the Lakers and Clippers. They're going to have to shoehorn them in there somewhere where they're supposed to have some longer rest periods. The Cleveland Browns are in a legal battle, and they might be moving out of Cleveland before the end of the decade. I'll probably dive into that a lot more next week, but man, that could be a mess. And right before I went to record on Thursday, I also read that the Brewers broadcasting legend Bob Uecker died at 90 years old. One of the all-time greats, and he has maybe the most recognizable call ever, which was, of course, just a bit outside from the Major League movies. He has tons of other famous ones, many of which are less appropriate and more hilarious. And Uecker himself was a backup catcher in the 60s. He actually won a World Series as a player. Then he called Brewers games for 54 years. He was a ringside announcer for WrestleMania. He hosted SNL. He had his own TV shows. He had to have been one of the most versatile entertainers ever, not just in sports. Having your hands in everything, that's exactly what I hope to be able to do someday. But for now, back to work, nose to the grindstone. The MLB free agency market went essentially silent for this week, which is unfortunate, a little bit boring. Two of the best guys left, Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman, are both represented by the same super agent, Scott Boras, who I've mentioned on the show a few times. He negotiates for dozens of current MLB players and almost always asks for way beyond market value for his guys, which could mean one man is tying up the entire free agent market. Pitchers and catchers report for spring training starting February 9th this year, I believe. So there's still some time. And if a few of the top names are still out there in March, what I think is going to happen, they're probably going to land 1 or 2 year deals with average teams that have some room to improve but don't have a crazy amount of cap, right? And they're going to sign for average valuations. These are not going to be record-breaking deals by any means. I truly believe that there are some athletes out there that are still motivated by just playing ball, that just love their sport so much that they would show up and do that no matter what the figures are. Is that too optimistic? Yeah, maybe. Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh is going to have an ablation and a hip replacement in the offseason. I hate to be that guy. Well, actually, no, I don't. But then it might have been something of a net positive that the Chargers kind of wet the bed in the wild card round. Harbaugh is definitely that kind of man to put that sort of thing off, and he gave another great quote in an interview about that, saying his heart would have to stop beating for him to retire and not be on the sideline next year. What an absolute savage. I love his mindset, but let it also be a lesson to you if you need it. Harbaugh is 61 and not getting any younger. Even though he does look very fit, I'm sure that coaching lifestyle comes with way more wear and tear than people think. I'm thinking about the eye strain from always looking at screens when they're watching film, sore jaws from excessive gum chewing. Some guys really go to town on that double bubble. Too many long nights with not enough sleep, the travel and jet lag even. I'm sure at some point Dan Campbell's going to stop having, a gallon of coffee a day or whatever it is. Coaches, just like players, they're human beings. That fatigue is all cumulative and it adds up over time. They're made of flesh and blood, right? So lighten up on them sometimes. I think that's the takeaway from it. And finally, I'll ever so briefly mention the Cowboys have just announced that they are not bringing back their head coach Mike McCarthy. That leaves 7 total head coaching openings to fill. I had predicted 8. I still think they will get there. I can't tell you exactly who the last guy is to be gone, and I wonder if maybe some GMs are going to renege a little bit on what they said, where they were, planning to have this guy back, and we like the direction that this guy's headed. Maybe Mike McDaniel with the Dolphins or Brian Daboll with the Giants. Somebody. We'll see if any organizations flip course on that, but still. 7 NFL head coaching openings is a ton. So that's all we've got for this week. You know how the rest goes. Whatever else catches my eye is always on the table. You can feel free to hit me on my socials if you have an idea for me. And this has been episode 44 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
He dropped it in a bucket. Touchdown.
Uecker transition 3, bang!
He's
bends it like Beckham. Are you kidding?